Sure, we're going to go ahead and start with the safety presentation specifically. First of all, you all should have gotten the rules, the homecoming activities guide, so that was all emailed to you, and it's also available on our website now as of this afternoon. So it's ready to go. If you want to look at that, I'll make sure I add a date if anything changes in it, and the co-chairs will let you know if there are any changes. But you should have gotten that. Let's go through some basic safety guidelines. I'm going to have Jim jump into if I miss something here, but I can go through a couple items. First of all, we're going to cover some general site safety, then some electrical items, fall protection, excavations, and then some new construction standards that we've added this year, which I'm sure you guys have undoubtedly noticed. First of all, there's a lot of things with general site safety. Just keep general safety on your mind when it comes to the place that you're building the lawn display. So keep things neat, don't leave boards and screws and nails and chunks of wood and that kind of thing laying around. That can be dangerous, that can cause you a lot of problems. So make sure you realize that the front yard of your chapter where you're building it is kept kept up and everything like that. Tool usage, make sure, I think this was mostly power tools we talk about, so if you don't know how to operate a specific power tool that you're using, please talk to someone who does. Please refer to people in your chapter who have experience in these different tools and power tools and that kind of thing. So, and then just general common sense when using it, so make sure anything has guards where they're supposed to be and that kind of thing. Hot work, talk a little bit about if you're doing welding. Of course, welding is very much a fire hazard, and if you're doing any work with steel or anything like that in your lawn display, just be aware that there is a really specific safety process for welding on the university, as far as the university is concerned, and you guys are need to be very cautious and be aware of all the hazards that come if you're doing that. I don't know how many chapters do a lot of welding, but be aware of that. Personal protective equipment and clothing. We expect you to wear safety glasses when you're working on lawn display, when you're on the site. We expect you to have some common sense with your clothing, so no open-toed shoes, no sandals, no long gapping clothing. Be careful if you have long hair and you're working around power equipment, that kind of thing. So, and we have changed specifically in there, we have a hard hat strongly recommended if you're working in an area where overhead hazards exist, and that's in the homecoming activities guide. So be aware of that if you're working, when you guys are working around scaffolding or lifts, or if people are up on the display, just be very well aware, and we do encourage strongly hard hats. Electrical safety, cover a few things. We do expect you all to use ground fault interrupters on your lawn display as far as electrical use is concerned, so that's obviously for your safety. Those kinds of circuits trip when they sense that the load is changing rapidly, and it causes you guys, if there's any problems, especially if it's wet outside, that saves us a lot of angst, and that will keep you guys safe. And all wiring, extension cords, and electrical things need to be outdoor rated, and so we've talked about that. We've done this for years, so most of you are very familiar with that, and most of you probably have acquired a lot of equipment that's outdoor rated for wiring and everything. And I'll actually have Jim cover some items on that as well.
I just wanted to emphasize, one of the things we've been doing a better job at was electrical safety. We could spend a lot more time here showing some poor shots from 4 or 5 years ago when we first started. But what I thought I would do is emphasize some of the things that we still need to improve a little bit about. This is an example of a outdoor rated fixture for lighting, outdoor rated light bulb itself. But what I want to point out is there's a special type of weather-tight connector that you need to use for each of these outdoor rated applications. And you see there's a little rubber gasket in there that the wiring comes in, and then it provides a weather-tight. And I'll send this around. But in addition, the other thing we'd like to try and push is that if you notice the ground fault, this particular one isn't a ground fault, but if you connect this onto a ground fault through the weather-tight connector, when you actually plug in an electrical device or an extension cord or something into this, if you don't have a cover of this nature, actually you won't have that circuit protected or that fixture protected. So they make this little cool little box, and Kurt really likes this, but what it boils down to is it's a protector for the connection inside there. You put the box on the extension on the box that you have, and then go ahead and pop out one of these little side panels, and then your cords can come inside, close the door, and it's weather tight. And we were just talking before you all came in, was the last 5 years straight, We've had rain, torrential rain, sleet. I think we spent 2.5 hours out in the sleet running from display to display last year during the building phase. So these things are very important, and it's a good idea to have something like this. It's something that would be good to upgrade, and I don't know that this type of equipment counts against your budget.
I would say it doesn't, no.
No, so this kind of thing does not. And then the good thing about this, and the good things about this strain relief type of weather tight connector, you can take them apart and reassemble next year. I know some of the groups had gone ahead and put wire in there and then caulked it in there with silicone. Real difficult to take apart and use for the next year. So the idea would be, you know, you buy this one time and you're protected from here on out. So.
And this is one of those four-story pictures that Jim talked about. So this is one of these things, covered box, junctions, that kind of thing need to be in a similar weather-tight, outdoor-rated box for all those connections. And we have some other horror pictures in here, I think, too. Ladder safety, just a few items about ladders. I don't know how often you guys are using ladders on at your sites, but I encourage you all, if you have some old rickety ladder that's been there 20 years, go out ahead and replace it, because I'm sure you'll get some use out of it. So just be aware of what the ladder should be used for. Make sure that it's in good working order. Again, if you have an old one, please get it. Get a new one. Extension ladders should be, you know, roughly 75-degree angle when they're used up against a structure, so be aware of that. Be aware of where you're putting it. Make sure the ground is solid, that kind of thing. And we encourage you, of course, to maintain 3 points of contact on the ladder at all times if you're up there. So.
One thing I want to point out on the ladders too, one good way to keep the idea, if you don't have a protractor in your pocket, to determine what a 75-degree angle is, we're looking for a 4-to-1 ratio, about 1 foot out from every 4 feet that you're going to rise up with a ladder. It's a good rule of thumb.
Scaffolding. Please don't mix components from different manufacturers when you have your scaffolding out there. So I hope you guys have acquired a good amount of scaffolding for whatever needs, and we're going to talk about how scaffolding is that much more important this year. Generally speaking, scaffolding and then electronic lifts or power lifts, again, as we'll cover in a little bit, those don't count against your budget either. So we encourage you to start acquiring some of these items that you can use long term. Beware and make sure your scaffolding is stable, correctly assembled. That's a picture of a base plate, so you'll need that to keep your scaffolding from sinking into the ground if it's outside, obviously in your lawns, and keeping it from becoming unstable. And make sure that nobody works underneath the scaffolding, and again, if people are working around the scaffolding, we've got hard hats strongly recommended this year. Some specifics about scaffolding with guardrails. They have guardrails, mid rails, and toe boards, so those are all standard scaffolding assembling requirements. Make sure the platforms, as opposed to this picture, which is again is a few years ago, where they've just got one piece of planking there, make sure that the platforms and the scaffolding are fully assembled with all the required components so that you have the safest use of that scaffolding, again, rather than this picture where it's just a few pieces that they put together. So make sure it's all there. Protection from falls. We have the walking working surfaces above 6 feet need to have guardrails. And that's a little bit more specific this year. And also for presentation participants, after you build the thing, if you've got a stairway or a walkway or a platform you're going to have people on, we need guardrails above 30 inches off of the ground. And those we want about 42 inches, and that's all pretty standard requirements. These are some of the new things that were coming out, the new specifics that we have. So the guardrail is 42 inches off the ground. And then generally speaking, we don't want any participants in the display. So Friday night when you guys are presenting, we don't want anyone in the display above 10 feet. And that is something we've had in the past, so you guys should be recognize that. As far as occupied platforms are concerned, this is also during the presentation. We don't want any more than 5 people on one platform at once. And what we had is we've kind of tweaked that a little bit and said if you have adjoining platforms, we need them to be 1 foot apart, and we don't want you to be able to travel between the 2 platforms. The reality is that this rule comes about because when we had 5 people per platform, so we didn't have 30 on one structure, then we had multiple structures tied together that we had people moving between, so that kind of circumvented that whole concept. And again, Jim is quick to point out that 5 people is like 750 pounds, and so you need to be aware of that when we're building these structures. And so if you're having an occupied structure, we want 5 people per structure, and we want them separated so you can't put them all together and then have a large platform. So we don't want that. And this also allows you to build multiple platforms in different places in your display that you have people standing on, so that you can do that, so you can have an unlimited amount of them, just 5 people per each one. Excavations, as a rule we had last year, was new, so we don't want your excavations to exceed 3 feet in depth. They can if you're using them for poles and structural members, as long as they're never occupied. You know, so this is something that we haven't had trouble with except maybe once or twice in the past, so just be aware of that with excavations. So that is in there. Just a couple things too about materials. A lot of you use reused materials. We encourage you to do that. Just be aware about use some common sense with the structural integrity of the items that you're using. If you've got a bunch of old boards laying around from past lawn displays, inspect them. Please don't use them if they're old, if they're rotten, if you've nailed 20 nails into them. Be aware of that. Throw them away. Get some new wood out. I know that we always used to talk about, if you need a 6-foot board, a 6-foot 2x4, please don't take 3 2-foot 2x4s and somehow try to combine them into one, 6-foot 2x4. So don't do those kinds of things. Use some common sense and be aware of your reused materials. We always cover fasteners too. Something we always used to talk about. Don't use 15 nails when 2 will do. I mean, there's a point where you're putting screws or nails into a structural member and you're actually making the board weaker by using a little bit of overkill. So just be aware of that. Use some common sense when you're using some of those building materials.